Hello, my name is Inga Mezerya. You are on my channel today, and I think we have a unique stream today because it became very discussed and caused a lot of ruckus even before we got on air. Today we have a stream with Arestovich. I announced about this stream in my first video when I returned to my channel at the beginning of March with Roman Tsymbalyuk, and this caused a whole storm in my small community. Let's put it this way, my channel, my viewers, my social networks. So if you still want to unsubscribe, and I heard that many people posted that if we see Arestovich in your stream, we will unsubscribe. So first of all, I want to say that I respect your decision. But second, I would like you to watch that stream first and then make this more balanced decision whether you are unsubscribing or not. Hello, Alexei. Hello. All right, so what did it start with? In the stream with Roman Tsymbalyuk, he said that you are gone, you have crossed on the other side. And I was not doing any streams for about 6 months, so during that time there was a lot of discussions about you, about whom you work for, and three major versions that surfaced. One is Russia, second is Republicans in the United States of America, and third, it is your undercover work for the office of the president, and all your bright statements actually withdraw negative from the president's office and his team and aid them in their work. So let us hit the ground running. Alexei, whom do you work for? And what did Tsymbalyuk say, whom do I work for, in his opinion? As a journalist, Alexei, he could not make a judgment, but he said that you switched to the dark side. Oh, the dark side of the force. Okay, then I work for the Sith. Let me acknowledge that out in the open. All right, yes, a sensational statement at the beginning of the stream, I think, is what every journalist is dreaming about. My God, Inga, I'm sorry we have to work in that paradigm of a crazy kindergarten. But okay, let's see what other questions are there. Sure, I will read a bunch of questions that I've selected. I asked on my Facebook and other socials to prepare questions for you, and I've reformulated some of them. So those people who were writing and leaving questions, I think they will enjoy hearing your answers. So in November of last year, Alexei, you made a statement that you most likely will go and run for president in the Ukraine elections whenever they happen. So what every other well-known person, a budding politician, would do in this case. A normal person, after this statement, would take a closer look at the audience that they can attract. That audience becomes an electorate in this case. Then they run a bunch of sociometric research to see what do these people like. And then based on this sociology, they also acknowledge what is liked by those who are wavering, who may jump on the bandwagon or not, and then they work on different theses to present to the public. You had a lot of statements made early in the war that were loved by most people, not all, but most. And then after declaring that you most likely will run for a president, you deviated and went a different route. You're talking about a lot of resonance matters. You continue criticizing your possible electorate. A future politician would usually be petting and praising their electorate. How would you explain your approach? Right, Inga, I have a very big drawback, a huge drawback in this whole picture. I have also not went to the field with a yellow background, yellow field and blue sky to represent our flag in some Ukrainian shirt, and I haven't made an inscription on that picture. I believe, I know, I will. And it's very difficult for me to answer all these questions. I'm laughing here, but let's proceed and try to be a little more serious, in all honesty. So I can suggest people to think on this topic. Perhaps because they're voting regularly for politicians who praise them, they find themselves in the situations they are. Because the same vicious cycle repeats over and over again. People vote for politicians pet these people, praise them, then they become elected, and people don't like their decisions, and then they look for new politicians. And that was repeating for the last 30 years. So I have a question to our people. People, Are you satisfied with the results of your voting, of your politicians that you brought in power? And let's say if you enjoy that what's happening with Ukraine, in Ukraine, around Ukraine, then continue doing it in the same cycle. But even in this case, I will not be able to find it in me to praise them. But I can respect their point of view. All right, Alexei. So for those who do not support you now, who are cursing you in social media, who are saying that you are bringing Ukrainians down, that you are putting yourself in a counter position to Ukrainians. At the same time, you're calling yourself a citizen of Ukraine. One of your recent posts does indicate that you are a citizen of this country and you're not planning to obtain any other citizenship. So what do they mean by I'm bringing them down or I'm humiliating them? Let's review that, Inga. I'm usually working from a position of a psychotherapist. And when you come visit one, he may tell you that, look, you have a certain feature of your psyche that does this 1, 2, and 3 with you, what you are complaining about. Is it humiliation? I'm doing basically the same. People are asking questions, and sometimes I help them to ask the right questions. When they complain about why things are so bad in the front, why things are so bad in the economy, why things are so poor with our partners, and I'm saying 1, 2, and 3. You have these features that cause these scenarios to life. And then they come back and attack me saying that I do humiliate them. Well, then don't watch me, right? Why are you watching me? Just stop watching my streams. Let just those few who enjoy these topics remain. And I'm very seriously waiting for those to unsubscribe. Unfortunately, they are not, and more of them subscribe. Perhaps they do like humiliation, and that basically tells me I should continue. Indeed, I have to highlight that your number of views on media had dramatically increased after you changed your position. Right, YouTube number of subscribers is growing drastically, and I enjoy it. It's easier for me to communicate via videos than run data and posts in other social networks. All right, let's go into the most resonance triggering statements that you've made. The ones that, as they say, exploded the internet. I highlighted 3 out of them. 1, that Ukrainians give motivation for Russian soldiers to continue fighting by dehumanizing them. 2nd, that Putin in reality does not want to fight with Ukraine. And the 3rd is when you called yourself Russian. So is it correct, in your opinion, after it's been over a month after each of these statements, do you think you were understood correct by Ukrainians? No. Well, some part probably did understand me right, but the bigger part did not. I got it totally wrong. The thing in Ukraine, the thought is not too popular. The art of thought is not a popular genre. We enjoy emotions much better. So it is somewhat high bar to expect that you will be understood. But somebody needs to say that, so I am. Let's start with the first. What is there? Dehumanizing, right? That we are dehumanizing Russians. All right, let's try to go through this thought logically. The problem of Ukrainians is that, for the most part, we behave as the worst examples of anti-Ukrainian propaganda. So there is a huge field of anti-Ukrainian propaganda where Russia injects $4 to $5 billion before the war. That was the number. That was just directly donated money to that field, and indirectly nobody is able to calculate. And the propaganda says what? That we're primitive, certain Ukrainian clothes-toting fellas who cannot even dream about being civilized and set civilized examples. And the main idea that they're pushing through is that, especially that's what they're broadcasting for Europe, is that Ukrainians organically cannot manage themselves. And let us, Russia, run Ukraine, and we'll continue managing it fine. And the second thought they translate is that Ukrainians are just as wild as we are, only worse. And they're wild and fascist, etc. What do Ukrainians do? We show that we do not appreciate government. A lot of Ukrainians absolutely do not value the government. Perhaps 1/10 of our population appreciates government as a structure. And then we see our fellow compatriots using dead bodies of Russian soldiers to write messages to Putin. or posting things in a social media saying, especially after some kids die in Russia after some event, they just would post, hey, the more the merrier. So what Russia does, they snip out these elements and they post and translate that to the West and transmit it at large. So I spend a lot of time in the West, in Europe and the United States, and if you think these things are not visible, this is a big mistake. This is wrong. They are seeing this. If you're interested, I can show you one of the posts by one of the opinion leaders in the Republican side in the United States. It was a very resonant story in the United States, and what's peculiar, she is African American. And you can also read Elon Musk, for example. He's a cult figure, especially in the United States. What is he saying about this war? And what does he notice? And they're talking about all of our weaknesses that I highlight as well, starting with our recruitment offices, catching people out in the streets, and all that dehumanizing that happens in Ukraine about Russian invaders. And this has become a very mainstream idea in the United States, and I keep hearing the same thought, that barbarians are fighting barbarians. Whom are we helping? And I will find that video. You can put it in the commentary or somewhere. And that video, basically, the main message of that Republican lady is that we are aiding evil. How do you think it correlates with absence of aid to Ukraine, with a delay of American help coming to Ukraine? Who had done it? You have done it, guys. If you think your small commentary are not seen by big people making decisions, this is not so. This is being analyzed, reviewed, snipped, and presented to those people who are making decisions. And then they do not make these decisions. So I'm not even calling upon morality here. I'm trying to highlight the logic of causation. You are doing A, and you're calling them pig dogs and orcs who need to die. And then the missiles that do not come to us to help us defend from those pig dogs. So these are the scissors that you guys have created and you're using to cut yourself. So this is a simple logic. What is the second message, Inga? Hang on, I want to clarify here. About a year ago, I want to say that somewhere, probably even on my channel, you said that Ukrainians need to be the warriors of light. So you're saying now that we're not being seen as the warriors of light anymore? Exactly, not anymore. They still remember about us as warriors of light, but our reputation is very tarnished and eaten up by moth, and most likely we tarnished that by ourselves. So there is no romanticism related to us. It would have passed normally, because you could not sustain romanticism for 3 years of this war. But the speed and the depth of its evaporation, this could have been affected by us, and we have down-regulated that in a very wrong direction. Because there are a lot of social research, polling that are done actively in the West about Ukraine, and there is a meaning of public norm. So remember my appeals from the pulpit of the office of the president: not shooting at civilians in Russia, do not make jokes, do not be cruel to Russian captives. Remember, there was one soldier who went viral after his friend died, and he appealed to kill everybody on the Russian side, including their children, and then he later had to apologize. So that was a very marginalized opinion back then, right, that we pushed up against it. Unfortunately, the power and pro-power Telegram channels were now peddling that for a while. And what do people do in difficult situation? They look at the opinion leaders. So when Nevzorovs and Tsymbalyuks start, who attack me rather often, they start to say that Russian pig dogs should all die. Then people, those who do not know what to think, they just make that, take that position. And at large, Ukraine considers that this is not a marginal opinion anymore. And all the polling shows that in Ukraine it is a norm view of life now. And that brings the West back to idea that it's barbarians against barbarians. And this is the main thought that was implanted into the West by Russian propaganda. That was their main effort to undermine the Western aid to us. This is not even a moral objection from me. I don't care about discussing morals with our large audience, but just think about reason. Look at Israel, for example, how they conduct their information warfare. They have lost it. Terribly lost it. Like I had an interview with the best radio from Israel, and it was snipped by many channels. And I asked them whether you can call Palestinians pig dogs like we call Russians in Ukraine. And they said, yes, sure. And everybody took that and pasted it everywhere. But then there is a continuation to that snip. Look at the successes of your information warfare versus Palestinians. So think. I was calling upon the morality before, but it's just useless. I think it's better to just call upon the logic on this point. Just see the direct consequence of your behavior. And the mainstream trend, we started to match the main presets of anti-Ukrainian propaganda peddled by Russia for the West. All right, second thesis, Alexei. Putin does not want to fight with Ukraine. For him, it is hard. Right, I have not changed my opinion about Putin, Inga. I've been observing him, watching him since about 2000. Putin is a right liberal, a classic right liberal of the end of 19th century. Kind of like Cecil Rhodes or Stolypin, just a smaller caliber. And if he wasn't a liberal, he wouldn't be holding Gref, a super liberal or ultra liberal figure, even by the Western standards, guiding his Russian savings bank, one of the major banks in Russia. And he wouldn't be following the International Monetary Fund recommendations. It's just that right liberals, they can fight, they like to fight, they know how to fight. So what's the end of the 19th century famous for? Just follow what Rhodes did in Rhodesia, in Namibia, and they're using armed force when they need to. But look at how long it took Putin to actually use it. In 2014, he took Crimea, and only in the 22nd, they started a large-scale warfare. 8 years of negotiations, snot, drool, and all the thing. And only later he started the war. So his psychotype is the one that doesn't like to fight. But look how he fights. He fights with superpowers like Georgia or Chechnya. And it took him so long to make a decision to engage with Ukraine militarily. Remember, 2 days before the war started, their inner discussion with Naryshkin and Putin, they are not exactly masterful in fighting. It just we've been baiting them with our idiocy and our weakness. Same story. They were not supposed on the 24th of February to attack Kiev. They were supposed to cut from Kharkov towards Dnieper and from Crimea towards Dnieper to encircle the eastern group, to cause a serious political crisis and essentially enforce the continuation of the politicians that we have dethroned previously. But why did they go towards Kiev? Because they saw that it's only 3,000 defenders per city, and they managed to aggregate 50,000 against that city, so 1 to 15, that looked like a very easy walk for them. So we behaved as food. We did not support our politics. All our statements about going to European Union, going to NATO, but we never found material basis to support our statements. It's almost as if the family that makes $2,000 a month is trying to live on a $2 million credit. The crash is inevitable. So we tempted them. And we cannot even say that they're strong fighters, that they're savvy on the battlefront. They're not. If they were, they would be fighting NATO, and they're actually scared of NATO, regardless of how they huff and puff. So this is one side of that story regarding the psychological portrait of Putin. And the second one would be that the situation right now is such that even by signing peace accords, if he does it now, he will achieve the same goals as he would have achieved by military push, just with lesser expenses. Because we understand that if we sign something with Putin right now, there'll be a lot of people there saying that look, Putin wants peace, and he's very realistic, and okay, he signed it, so let's remove sanctions from him. Let's also stop supporting Ukraine militarily and financially because they're provoking this war. And if he, in his idiotic mindset, would have understood things a little better and went for signing the peace accords and achieving it now, he would have spent much less efforts to get a lot more. But they're idiots, so they continue fighting. Otherwise, they could have also gotten the Nobel Peace Prize, because he potentially can reach the same results that he's reaching now with war by peace accords if we fall for it. Alexei, in this situation, very often people compare Ukraine and Russia with the rapist and the victim of a rape. So if we're taking a situation where a woman is walking through the dark forest, this is almost as when people attack a woman saying that she misbehaved and caused all that upon herself. But this doesn't remove responsibility from a man or an aggressor who understands that there is nobody seeing him and uses this chance to attack her. Right, Inga, so how it works in my mind. I would say that aggressor is always guilty. The blame is always on the aggressor that cannot be washed or explained. And the victim always has responsibility for behaving as a victim and provoking the situation. Do you understand the difference? And I'm asking our audience, I understand that you do understand. So what I'm saying is that, yes, he is a scoundrel, he is a horrible person for attacking you, but you are wearing a short skirt in a very bad part of a town, so you are carrying some responsibility for that behavior. But all the guilt is on the rapist, because no length of skirt or the route of the person can justify his actions. Nothing can justify these actions from any point of view. If, however, we will only be blaming the rapist, but will not be discussing our degree of responsibility, then we will only be exacerbating our position of victim, and we will not learn the lessons out of this difficult situation. And I hope nobody has any doubts that Putin will try to arrange this second round of this war sooner or later. And that's it. We just need to learn the lessons. All right. So I think Alexei already deployed a bunch of ideas for everybody to review and discuss. So if you are leaving your thoughts in the comments, I will be very grateful to you to see what our audience thinks that is listening or watching our stream. And if you have not unsubscribed yet, thank you very much for that. If you decided to subscribe, I'm grateful for that. And do not forget to click the like button. This definitely helps us. Let me open a scary mystery for people who doesn't understand branding. The narrower the audience is, the more high quality the brand is. So that's why I'm saying, all those who want to unsubscribe, just go ahead, unsubscribe. I don't need 800,000 in Facebook or 2 million in YouTube. I'd rather be broadcasting for 30 great logical people than for all those who get offended, watch the cuts and snippets taken by somebody else, and then run to my channel to subscribe and express how upset they are on there. All right, the third thesis, I am Russian. When you made this statement in the interview to Yulia Latynina, I wrote on Facebook that I cannot remember that since 2017 or 2018 that I've been taking your interviews. I remember your theory about Rus-Ukraine, how much you've talked about that, and one can find videos on YouTube where you're explaining that Rus is actually Ukrainian and Moscovites is Russian Federation. So I'm Russian. That's what you said in the interview to Yulia Latynina, who is Russian. Her audience is, well, when I say she's Russian a Russian citizen, right? She's a Russian citizen, exactly. Her audience is mostly citizens of Russian Federation, and these words were understood unilaterally by most people that you are not referring to the ancient epoch and ancient times, but about that you are a citizens of Russia, as it was understood today. And that had a very serious effect in Ukraine. So when you are saying that, when you were saying that on her stream, you understood that this would be understood and perverted this way. Oh, absolutely, Inga. I understood that this topic will trigger a lot of people, will draw a lot of attention, and that would allow me to bring again my topic of Rus-Ukraine based on this triggered audience. This is how Ukraine is set up. This is one of our issues. We do not have many serious results. The only serious results that we have achieved in 30 years is a destruction of Russian military machine. This is a fantastic result. We can be proud of it. But we don't have others. We don't have economy or political or cultural results. And why is that? Because we're not discussing this. And this is a tragedy that our country is comprised of a lot of triggered people, that our public opinion prevails and everybody rushes to trample upon somebody who has a different opinion. Because my great opinion, somebody was brave enough to, or stupid enough to bring a different opinion into the circle. And people are very hard to understand the value of different opinions. And that's why all of this great personal collective opinion of all these public intellectuals mixed with people or speakers or bloggers or government, as a result, turns out to be a collection of provincial sets which are horrible and cannot be scaled and do not lead us anywhere as a country. So I'm a citizen of Ukraine. I'm not going to leave that country. I'm going to continue working with Ukraine. I'm not going to abandon Ukraine. And as somebody who fought for this country, who bled for this country, who continues working for this country, I can afford myself to criticize ourselves, including myself as a part of this people, because I have a holy right. A Ukrainian can criticize Ukrainian and Ukraine as a country. Have you seen me criticizing any other country to that degree? Because it is their issues. They should have their own bloggers criticizing themselves. I can only note certain things about the collective West and the United States, but I can afford myself to criticize in depth our people. And I have a passport of a citizen of Ukraine, so that's what allows me to criticize this country. And I calculated the method that works most effectively with Ukrainians. And it is simple. You first give a face slap, and then you explain. Otherwise, they don't understand. If you think that I like provoking and then explaining, I do not like this method. But I do that on purpose, because I know that this is the only way that will reach them through hysteria. You know, when you're visiting a psychotherapist, you know when a psychotherapist can give a slap in the face, when a patient is wallowing in hysteria. So our society is hysterical, and this precludes it from setting clear goals, understanding deficiencies. You can also spill them with cold water, but it's difficult through the screen. So my method is very simple, and I'm explaining it for the first time on air with you. So that's what I was doing. When we're fighting with Russia, I go there to the stream and say, I am Russian. Then everybody starts running and screaming, and then a part of the people who started screaming actually go in and listen and start to read and understand what did they mean. And then they would understand, oh, he meant a different meaning, not a citizen of Russian Federation, but Rus. Because personally, I do not hate anything as much as I hate Moscovitism. You can look up the article that I wrote back in 2006, that way back, when I'm explaining a difference between Russian and Moscovite. And I will probably find it and put it in the commentary to that stream, that Moscovism is the ugly distortion of the idea of Rus, the ugliest distortion and the biggest damage to that idea done ever. Nobody can harm the idea of our Rus. No Mongols or Poles or Turks, nobody had brought more damage to our core idea than Moscovites. This is the ugliest thing designed by Satan against the source of Rus. And you don't even understand how much I hate that. With all your using the dead Russian bodies of soldiers to inscribe messages to Putin and all that, you do not even hate Moscovites and Moscovism as much as I do. That's why I am pushing the topic that Ukraine is Rus and they're Moscovites. And these are two ideas clashed in a hard juxtaposition and fight against each other. So they were never Rus for me, they were never Russians for me, they were Moscovites, the most evil enemies of Rus and the idea of Russian. And Russian Federation is a new form of Moscovites, of Moscovism. Shamil Basayev was calling it Rusism, now it's being used as Russism, and I'm calling it Russian Federationism or Moscovism. Are there Russians, like real Rus among them? Yes, they are. They're also connected to that central source as we are. But they are the first victims of Moscovites, and they're the most repressed in that society, because ideologically they're biggest enemies. So who's Russian there? Basilashvili, Akhidjakova, from my point of view, Pugacheva, Galkin. These are Rus people, the real Rus, who are connected to the source of Rus. Yes, they are citizens of Russian Federation, and of course they bear an imprint that they were born there, they were interacting in Russian system of connections, Russian culture, system of Russian Federation. But still, they are connected to the same source. And we have a different specificity. We have Rus source from Svetoslav the Brave, which is a key figure for me, from whom it all starts.
In the period of Ukrainianism, which took a certain form in these lands, one can compare that the empire of Charlemagne, that was united initially, then turned into France, Italy, and Germany in this logic, but they all consider Charlemagne to be their founder, and that's what I'm talking about. So the form it took in Russia is worshipping the government, worshipping the state. That's the main key difference between us and Russian Federation or Moscovites. For us, Rus and government are very different things. That state and country are very different things. For them, it's the same. Russia, Russian Federation is translated from Greek, sounds the same, is Rus, and they equate that with the state. And that's what I was talking about, that Russian person can be the holiest, the most exemplary person until the government orders him. The moment the government orders him to do something, he is ready to do quite a lot of things and forgets all his morals. I know a lot of intellectuals of different levels in Russia who can explain the necessity of Bucha, the tortures of kids, the destruction of hospitals in Syria, because Russian state needs to do that. And I remind them of Russian Strugatsky brothers, who said that if you have to do treachery for your ideals, that means your ideals are shit-worthy. And that's my estimate about Moscovitism, the attempt to speculate on the source of Rus and attempt to present it to be the sole representative of it. And that's my explanation of what do I mean I'm Rus, I'm Ruski. You see how cool of an explanation about the source of Rus will our listeners hear just because I mentioned that I'm Ruski on Latynina's channel. That's why I'm Ruski like Sviatoslav the Brave, like Vladimir the Great, like Yaroslav the Wise, modern-day Ukrainian, original Ukrainian. And those who do not want to study it, I remind them that this was the language that was spoken by Vladimir the Great. You can study it as the language of our ancestors. That makes it worth of research and study. And this is one of the ideas how in the project Rus-Ukraine that I propose is the way to bring to peace Russian with Ukrainian, and why Ukrainian would be a state language. Because if it was the language of our fathers, we at least can honor it by studying it. So this is the whole chain of thought, and that's why I'm saying I'm Ruski, juxtaposing that to what they represent. And for 2 streams with Latynina, I was sending that message. You are not Ruskis, you are not exactly Rus in Russian Federation, you're Moscovites. You're so far removed from the Rus ideas, if you can even turn yourself into, because that's another conversation, how much indoctrinated they are. So, for me, this is my method, a slap in the face and then a detailed explanation. If Ukrainians en masse were ready for a serious discussion without being upset, without hysteria, then for me, during my whole public career, in the 10 years that I was in the limelight, you would not have heard any provocation. But unfortunately, our society doesn't understand it this way. That's why I'm working as a psychotherapist on that level. And that's why I'm explaining it to our listeners. I know how to deal with people who are hysterical and how to make sure they understand the message. If I could spill cold water on them, I would have been. I actually tried to do that when I was talking about the West and autumn and their weakness and not readiness to support Ukraine. And today, yeah, seems like finally everybody, all those who are worshipping EU and everything, they're now coming to European Union and to the West asking the same questions. So when I posed these questions half a year ago, I became a pariah. Right, Alexei, you're very often the person who brings the bad news first, and all that negative usually is being drawn to you rather than to other people. I think it's a stream with Nikolai Feldman you were talking about strategic stalemate, and I think only the lazy one did not accuse you of being or pushing Russian narratives here in the Ukrainian media sphere. Right, and now they're together talking about the same issues that I was talking back then. So perhaps it's not me bringing Russian narratives, but them being too slow. All right, I want to ask you some questions that users were writing under the announcement of this stream. I'll rephrase a little, but roughly that's what they mean. If you're not the agent of Russia, then why you're not being afraid of being liquidated by Russian special services? Where, Inga, is it written that I'm not concerned with that? Do I carry the banner or the badge that, or have the running marquee saying that I'm not concerned with Russian special services? And you know, many people think that it's dangerous on the front, that Arestovich is hiding because he's a weakling and coward. By the way, I spent 2.5 years on the front in my life already. You can actually see the video, find it on YouTube, where I brought 5 vehicles of volunteer aid to a completely surrounded Kramatorsk airport. And if you think it was easy, I'm not even talking about a lot of other episodes. So imagine brave Kievan Rus defending a surrounded airport. So through all the enemies attacking him, I brought in 5 vehicles of volunteer aid, radios, sites, supplies, medicines, and I brought them in and they brought them out. So if you think it's so secure here in the West, you're very wrong. Very, very wrong. Just, I cannot be telling you all the details, but you're idiots screaming there that, Arestovich, you're hiding from the front because you're a coward. But on the other hand, you're asking me questions if I'm not concerned or not afraid of Russian special services. Just give it a thought, if it is really safe in the West, where I am supposedly hiding from the front. Right? There are a lot of very peculiar things happening around, and I cannot be, unfortunately, disclosing all of them until the war is over. I have my own concerns. I have to conduct a certain way of life, and I have to make sure that I manage these risks. If you would have been living the same style, you probably would fall apart after a few months. You cannot touch the handle without a napkin, for example, or a glove, right? Little things. So you're saying that you have a lot of concerns to be afraid for your life. Well, I have actual real information and real data that tells me how careful I have to be and certain measures I need to take. And I will tell more about these details after the war. So when people are saying Arestovich is avoiding the bombs and shaheeds being outside of Ukraine, well, do you think I was not under those? Or do you think we in the office of the president had some guarantees that nothing will hit us after we sank their battleship Moscow and other things? The first 50 days of this war, I was rather sure that I will not survive. Just as an excursion into a recent past. So just try living my life a little. What I live in the West, it's not that sweet. Just understand, I'm not a usual citizen. Imagine just imagine that position, that I'm an ex-advisor of Zelensky who is now in opposition. Do you think I only have to be concerned with Russian special services? Or are there any other forces interested in me being more silent? I can guarantee that a lot of people asking these silly questions do not have within them to live the style that I have to live now. And they're telling questions of how afraid or not afraid I am, right? This is a bit of a diversion from this question, but right, Alexei, thank you for answering this. I appreciate that's how they asked it, right? So let's continue. Then other question. Do you understand that your departure out of the country is a signal to Ukrainians that everything is really bad in Ukraine? Well, don't mix me with the ordinary citizen of Ukraine. Very often they try to compare me with those who fled from Ukraine, ran across the border and are hiding somewhere nearby in Europe. This is not what I'm doing. Situation around me is different. Situation around me is rather different. And there are a lot of other factors. So let me put it delicately. I do not come back to Ukraine for 2 reasons. First, because I'm personally being chased by President Zelensky. He is conducting a personal war against me, while I'm not conducting a war against him. This is a sign of deep unprofessionalism to do personal warfare, to wage that. So, no. And by the way, if you notice, whenever they sign proper agreements and something that they have to be praised for, I always praise them for that. But when they have drawbacks, that's when I criticize. On the other hand, I also have a lot of things to do in the West that are all directed at strengthening the defense of Ukraine. So that's it. And I have positive motivation and negative motivation. If I had a chance to return to Ukraine, I would have been there tomorrow. But only on one condition, that I would have a chance to leave it when I need to, because one needs to be a complete idiot to abandon the opportunities that I have in the West, to return to Ukraine to just show that here, that's how good I am, so you can like me in your Facebooks, in your Vibers and house chats. That's not serious, really. If I had a chance to return back and then to continue living when I need to work for the country, to work for Ukraine, but I don't have this opportunity. If I had, I would have been in Ukraine yesterday. You just, unfortunately, do not know a lot of things that I have to work with. And one more message. Lada Luzina, a known Ukrainian writer, she posted in her Facebook that when you bring up the topic of abortions and you compare it with Satanism, you repulse a big chunk of female electorate from yourself. So a question from that side, why are you doing that for? What are you doing that for? Well, first of all, I do not have a task of attracting or repulsing anybody. My task, as I see it, is to inform. I'm not talking about the inner truth and other things. I'm just informing. That's one. Second, abortions is a Satanism, in my view. It's a legalized murder of children and confirmed and all with the government. So Lada Luzina is not being an ordinary citizen. She could have dug a little deeper. She hears what I'm saying, and if she spent a little more time, she would probably understand my position. Abortions is not the problem by itself. The problem is unwanted pregnancy, because women do not get pregnant just by a miracle, right? That means that men are involved. And for me, the problem of abortion is the problem of responsibility of men. And if you bring it wider, the responsibility of the couple. And that means certain education, bringing up certain responsibility with the men in the couple, and a lot of things we need to do so that the topic of abortions would go away from standing that much in our faces. I think it's the problem of men, first of all. And why women are holding up on abortions is because they do not believe that man can be changed. This is their safety switch. And they see that they will be left alone in many cases when the situation unfolds, and the dad-to-be just waves his hand and disappears, and then they're left to hold the baby, and it changes their whole life. So the idea is to somehow prevent this unwanted pregnancy from changing their life. That's why they're holding on to abortion so much. And I think the main issue we need to address is bringing up the men, because abortion is removing responsibility from men. It's a wrong step, I think. We need to bring the framework of abortion, the bar, a little higher. One can do that if I had a magic wand. Strong prohibitions do not quite work in a society. They bring to other heresy, usually. They bring to other unintended consequences. And society then starts to wobble as a boat on the wave and to rock, and we have more issues. So I would look at abortions only when they're needed by medical reasons, or available when women, after going through social aid, through explanations and more support network and other details, only if after that the woman decides to go on with abortion, then it would be all right. But it needs to be a step number one. And we need to change the responsibility on men from women on this. And the society also needs to bear responsibility, because for 32 years of our existence as a country, after USSR, at the minimum calculations, Ukraine has lost about 2 million citizens. That's the minimum, the lowest number quoted. There are way highest, up to 50 million, right? But I'm just taking the lowest bracket. So how many citizens have we lost in this war? If you recalculate, abortions are a bigger danger for our country, and that has also a multiplier on the future generations. And demography is a big issue for our country. Some specialists are already saying that we may not dig ourselves out of this pit. And being in that dire situation, it's not a good position to be a proponent of abortions. So this is my position. Make sure that men are responsible, that men bear this responsibility. People, unfortunately, do not listen the whole explanation very often. But Lada Luzina is an upstanding citizen. I hope she finds within herself to read deeper. Right, let's not attack her. Perhaps she's just a translator, broadcaster of this question. Right, okay. So then I am basically providing an open answer to this question. And thank you, Alexei, for your explanation. I hope we can now go to the next question. We've been talking for a while. I did not want to have the stream just about you and questions about yourself. Let's only ask him questions. By the way, Inga, let me open you another mystery of our kitchen. It's called intel or drawing fire to yourself, when you cannot open positions of the enemy other than presenting yourself. Basically, when you go into attack, you do not have a goal to break through, but you go there to draw the fire onto yourself and then highlight the artillery or somebody else where the enemy is hiding. So I'm a good trigger for people to start thinking about the topics that I bring up. I am slapping a lot of people in the face by the mere fact of how I exist. And this is very organic for me to disturb a lot of them by the mere fact of my existence. And some people will listen, others will not. Those who do, that's already payment enough for me. Okay, I don't know how it is in other country, but in Ukraine, what I can confirm is that very often it's only the beginning, the title that comes in, what you call a slap in the face, that is being broadcasted through the country. Where you come explaining things, this is not really being explained or discussed much. It's like in that anecdote when somebody says your daughter is a prostitute and the person says I don't have a daughter, and then go explain that, right? So there's a whole background story to this, but people are not interested in listening to that. Right. If we had a normal media, then neither you nor me would have to use our own Telegram channels or YouTube channels, right? People and us would be using the proper media usually. But I would say in my observations, people are getting it. I wouldn't be doing it if I would not see the results. I know very well that they get it. And future explanations and the discussion itself, it reaches them. Even physically measuring the public opinion, public polling, you can see that. And as for the quotations, did you notice how many covert quoting of Arestovich in other opinion leaders of Ukraine, even pro-government, etc.? And you're saying that doesn't reach. It does. They're just using it in a very primitive way. What they need to, they snip out and they present what is important for them and they hide what is not necessary for them. So now a trending topic, for example, is when Sivkovich was taken on a picture together with one of the higher functionaries of ES party, right? One of the closest compatriots of Poroshenko. Have you seen at least one person of ES discussing it? They're just going mum. And that's why I despise them all as a party for this. And either saying that I despise Ukrainians. No, I do not. I do not respect them a lot, but I do love them a lot. And many people do not understand this position. They think that love and respect go together. No, they're not always. For example, you love your kids, but you don't necessarily respect them. That's why I do respect us for what is respectable, for heroic resistance to all this Moscovism, but I do not respect us for our drawbacks. And that position is rather weak that they take. It's funny. But if you want to grow in discussions, in debate, you need to present your opponent and imagine your opponent to be stronger than he actually is. Only then you set the bar higher, and that's how you grow. That's what I teach in my courses, that you need to respect your opponent. That's your reason, that's your path to grow. And unfortunately, we often present our opponent as somebody who's easy to be beaten. And that's the same situation with Putin. So I'm often being asked, you're probably serving to that great Putin. You'd know that my real attitude to this gang in Russia, Putin, Bortnikov and Patrushev, not because I despise them, but because I despise them for their actions, right? One can take a look at the terrorist act with Crocus, for example. Where can you see when ISIS would be screaming, we've done it, and then these FSB guys would be coming out and saying that, no, it's not you. So they're pulling Ukraine onto this as much as they can. They act in a very minuscule, puny way. And Russia is a big country with a lot of tanks, but their position is rather weak, moral, ontological, political. And I'm only triggered a bit by the fact that we are taking even a weaker position, because we could have been done with them in a two-step if we took a stronger position. And that Russian overall core, the Moscovite core that represents, it always brings a rather low position. And unfortunately, we as a country failed to take a higher level in this case. And that's what upsets me. I separate people and their emanations, and all these emanations that I don't like, that's the ones I despise about our society. So if, for example, the speakers of that party would come out and said, yes, we apparently have a rat in our party, right, or a snake, whatever, So perhaps we'll do the investigation and address it properly, but they're just mum. And the media magnate Poroshenko, who has a ton of talking heads, such strong patriots, they are very quiet about it. Suddenly, his closest friend apparently was going to these forbidden territories, meeting with Russians there. What he was doing there, they're just staying mum, they're not discussing. And as you said, they take the slap and they drop the explanations. Very often, they don't even take the full slap in the face. They take just a piece of it because they're not even have enough attention to grab the whole one. And do you know where they're doing it from? If you think Poroshenko, Stanenko, and Pritula are doing that, it's not them. They're a second group. The first one is the Office channel, and they're doing it since mid-March of 22, when societal polling revealed me to be the second popular person in the country. And I lived with them for a year and a half. I was participating in negotiating groups, the leading speaker of power. They were spitting in my back. I was sitting and looking in their eyes and breaking bread with them while they were spending tens of thousands of dollars to continue ordering character assassinations. They were doing that and they continue doing that. They have never stopped. And when I misspoke about Dnieper, they turned away from me and were glad to push me out. And my friends in cybersecurity in our government showed me how the Office channels and Poroshenko and Medvedchuk channels work together, the trifecta of them, but the Office was the first to lead. Poroshenko and Medvedchuk, they're only picking it up on the back end and continuing with it. So for 10 years over, there is a pretty big propaganda machine working against what I'm doing. And you, instead of making your own opinion, you, talking to some of our listeners, that you're following this propaganda and then you're coming here and telling Inga that you'll unsubscribe. You're victims of this propaganda who allowed this propaganda to deceive yourselves and you're not trying to understand and get details of the story. So what attitude do you think I would have to those listeners? Right. I do hope that there'll be very few unsubscribers as a result of this. I hope people will watch and make their conclusions, but if they decide to do so, I respect their opinion. So, Alexei, in order to maybe touch a little bit of the news as well today, although I think we touched upon a lot of important topics that have the whole right to become news in our information space. But now to you as to an expert and politician. Now, en masse, on the third year of war, people are starting to talk that Putin might be actually invited to G20 summit. And I think Brazil started this conversation, from whom we could have expected that it's a country of BRICS and it's far removed from Europe. Now we also heard that Macron does not exclude this probability, and United States also are not adamantly against it. So what are these bells about? Oh, they never excluded this probability. Today was a piece of news that Germany recorded a vessel that was carrying enriched uranium from Russia to United States. Enriched, right? Yes. And that's with Russians yesterday declaring a holy war to the West and calling them Satan. They're trading with them, right? Trading uranium with them. And United States, calling Russia the axis of evil, continue buying these supplies from Russia. So they can be talking a lot about Bucha, about never again. In reality, there is Realpolitik approach flourishing. That's why I'm saying you guys need to look at the actions, not at the words. And for as long as on the arms that fall on our heads, on the bombs and missiles from Russia, there are only 14% of spare parts manufactured by Russia proper. Everything else is supplied from West and other countries. And that I already gave my attitude to the West and my understanding of their position. I was pushing it rather hard until Macron came out and finally decided to conduct a strategic change. I can only welcome that. Situation drastically changed, so my rhetoric also changes along with it. If a person had no fever and then now he's running 103, 105, then or 41 Celsius, then you cannot treat them in the same fashion as before, right? So now what is being discussed that Macron had secret conversations with Scholz and offered a special approach that even became a meme since then. It's called strategic ambiguity. Right. Very new term for us, right? Don't laugh. So they're running with this strategic ambiguity. What is implied behind it? Before, they used the strategy of red lines, right? And Macron is saying that the strategy of red lines did not work. We were thinking that Russians need to understand what will be the consequences, but that didn't quite work. So now they're playing a different strategy that Kremlin should not understand. What are we doing? What are we ready for? And it would make it more difficult for them to know what to expect. This is as if to compare when you're walking on a street that is being lit by the lights, or when you're walking on the very dark street where you can fall, when you can poke your eye out, and he's suggesting to go that path. And this is rattling the boat proper. On one hand, you'd be inviting them to G20. On the other hand, you'd be promising that we would come deploy French troops to Ukraine. So he's suggesting this position, and perhaps the West is in this position. Let's not come to quick conclusions. Perhaps this is their approach. But if we talk seriously, it will end up with some form of negotiations sooner or later. And the main difference we're facing in that aspect is if we negotiate from positions of power or from position of weakness. Russia understands that just fine as well, and Putin is leading his position to make sure that though Ukraine would be in a weak position and Russia would be in a strong position. And this is how we understand the intermediary results of this approach. And the West finally figured it out that negotiations need to happen when Russia in the position of weakness and Ukraine and the West are in the position of power. And that's what they continue to talk about. So, wonderful. Now, what kind of negotiations are we talking about? Since the first moment when I suggested to negotiate and everybody fainted and started being a bit hysterical, now President himself is coming out in Ukraine and starts to talk about negotiations. So I have a question. Why for me bring up this topic in September? He gave an order to SBU to prosecute me, and now he's coming out himself and talks about negotiations. How does one understand this position? And the question is that we are running here with borders of 91, right? But as you see, that topic is being on the downtrend. Our task is to win this intermediary round of that big war from the position of force to achieve the right point together with Europe. And it's great that they're awakening and ready to fight with Putin directly. That actually cancelled his main idea for 2024, which was to bring it to the nuclear blackmail and to force Europe to refuse from these negotiations, to withdraw from it. And his position would be to make sure Europe is not a participant in these negotiations. For us, it would mean a total and utter catastrophe. And this is not going to happen. So this is great news. I became an optimist again. It means I've done my work. My task as an intel officer was to scare everybody shitless, and I think I've done it right. So now I'm free to go. Alexei, thank you so very much for that stream. I appreciate your time. It was very interesting for me to listen, and I hope our viewers also enjoyed that. If you think to unsubscribe, sure, go ahead, do that. But otherwise, please click the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to Inga's channel, to Alexei's channel, and to the Privateer Station if you were listening to that in English. Thank you, everybody. Till later.